Namo Buddhaya. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly monk chat at Empty Cloud Monastery. And my name is Bante Sumita.
And I'm Bante Sanata Bihari. And my name is Vagda.
Okay, so as for the weekly questions, can you read?
Do you want me to read them, Bante?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Small for me.
feel free to leave any questions you have. And we have a question from Jessica that says, I'm very grateful for my Dhamma practice. Soon I'll be going back to my hometown to help my 91-year-old mom through surgery for colon cancer. My brother has a lot of anger toward her. I've asked him to use a... Should be here. Okay. She asked him to use a gentle, caring tone when speaking with her, but she slips into autopilot and yells at her. He slips. I'm relying on the Dhamma and my inner peace, knowing there won't be outer peace. How can I best show up? So,
I think many of us have this problem because we are troubled when other people are troubled, and it's like the winds outside is shaking your inner peace. So the most important thing for us is to maintain our inner peace, calm ourselves first. That will be very important. Like in the Ratana Sutta, Chatubhivate asampa kampiyo. It is said those great enlightened ones, they also can maintain their inner peace just like strong poles, not shaking with the winds that is coming from all different directions. So you also need to practice yourself. First, practice loving kindness to yourself and then to other ones. Hopefully your brother can also, your brother, right? Can also be impacted with your own loving kindness, and then you can also send loving kindness to your ailing grandmother. And over here, the monks also would like to, maybe we can start with a short blessing towards your 93-year-old grandmother. Okay, so let us start with that loving kindness towards your grandmother. Sabbitiyo vivajjantu sabbarogo vinasato mate bhavatvantarayo sukhi digayuko bhava bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba buddhanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba dhammanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te bhavatu sabba mangalam rakhantu sabba devata sabba sanghanubhavena sada sotti bhavantu te. May she be well, happy, healthy, safe, with the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem. Would you like to say something more?
what I found very useful is to, always practice Sati, to always practice mindfulness, awareness, especially of feelings, our feeling tone, Vedana. Vedana will let you know, about how you feel to it, how you see the situation, before it gets into maybe actions or speech or even thoughts. The Vedanas a very subtle feeling that later turns into an emotion and a whole train of thoughts and actions and words. So if we can really practice Vedana Upasana, right, observing awareness of the feeling tone of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feelings, we can catch that feeling as soon as it arises. Right, we hear the sound of whoever that person is, maybe your brother, something aggressive, and that feeling comes to the sound, right? That unpleasantness, and then from that comes the aversion, and then from the aversion comes the hate and all the other difficult things or whatever frustration. So if we can always be aware of what's going on, place our attention inside, keep our attention on Vedana and all the other um, like the body and also the chitta and the dhammas, we can become aware when we're being triggered before it comes out into some gross form. So that's one thing, to always have sati. The Buddha in many places tells us that we should be developing mindfulness from the moment that we wake up until we go to sleep. And then also, like in the Metta Sutta, to always practice the Brahma Viharas from the moment that we wake up until we go to sleep. And then for me, at least, when people are angry, I see it like usually like wounded people or a wounded animal screams out in pain. The anger for me is just like a scream that they're in some sort of pain. So then natural compassion comes towards that person, like, oh, this person is in pain. Like if I were to see an injured animal screaming, or you try to help an injured animal, it may lash out to you. So then we can also use that kind of compassionate lens to view the situation, because there's nothing we can do about the other person. In a way, we kind of have to accept it and kind of give up. And we can only really work on ourselves and see what we can do. The person will change when they're ready to change. If that may not ever happen. So we also have to have the equanimity to understand that that's the karma, and there's not really much we can do about it. But
I think you can also take this question first, and it looks like it's also related, right?
yeah, it says, S asks how to give some special care to a family-like colleague who got diagnosed with cancer. Should I express more care, or should I remain the same attitude as usual so that he doesn't feel people's pity on him? I feel sad and lost and completely not sure what to do. Oh, myself.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they want to add
You're
something. Yes.
oh, okay.
It looks like it's more related, right?
Yeah. Well, I would definitely express care. I would definitely express loving kindness, metta and care to him. But you don't necessarily need to, you know, um, talk about the cancer with him if that's not what he feels comfortable doing. You can still be caring though. And I think a big difference here that might be helpful is the difference between kind of loving kindness and care and pity, right? Or compassion and pity. So pity is, sometimes the words can be messy, but usually if we say pity, it means like we're feeling sorry for them. Like, you know, it's it's too bad that you have this thing that I don't have. Like, um, kind of this attitude. It's a little bit of superiority, right? Like, oh, this person is so poor, and they're kind of inferior to us, so we should feel bad for them. But that's not really compassion. It's kind of very close to compassion, but compassion or pity. Oh, there we go.
Strange.
Okay. So, sometimes if we, let's say that we have something and then we feel like other people are judging us, and they're being kind to us because they're judging us, because they think that we're somehow inferior. That would be pity, and it has a feeling to it, right? Like, people are only nice to you because you have cancer, right? That type of thing. But instead, we want to just be kind and compassionate whether or not he had cancer. So you can almost imagine that if he didn't have cancer, would you still have this feeling of care come up? Or is it only directed at this cancer about him? And if it's only directed at the cancer and otherwise you wouldn't care, then that might make him feel uncomfortable, because then he might feel like you don't really care. You only pity him because of his disease. But if you try to care for him as a person, It doesn't matter if he has cancer or not, but I'm just going to be kind to him no matter what. And I'm going to make this person feel comfortable. I'm going to make this person feel like whether or not they have cancer, I'm here for them. That really will make him comfortable, right? Because then he knows, oh, this person actually cares. Whether or not I have cancer, they're going to be my friend. And so I think that that would be the right attitude to have. And then with that attitude, you can ask him. You can ask him, how are you doing? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about the situation? This must be very tough. And maybe he doesn't, and that's okay. And if he does want to talk about it, then you can listen. That way you have, you know, you're more accommodating to his needs. So you don't have to feel like there's this unspoken cancer in the room that you have to ignore it to make him comfortable. Just care for him. And then with that caring attitude, just ask him. And if he doesn't want to talk about it, don't think that he doesn't want to talk about it because he is too weak. Maybe he has other reasons not to talk about it. So as long as your caring is just unconditional, doesn't matter if there's cancer, doesn't matter if there's no cancer, doesn't matter if he talks about the cancer or doesn't talk about the cancer. As long as you're friendly and caring and warm, then I think no matter what you do, you'll be moving in the right direction. Is that
It's a good answer.
Okay.
Yeah. I think when we talk about, as Venerable mentioned, Brahma Viharas, in Brahma Vihara we do have Metta, Karuna, Mudita, and Upekha. So Karuna is the compassion that we can direct towards those people who suffer or who are inferior, who are not so comfortable like regular way, and that way you can also feel that gap probably when you are when you are healthy, you are more comfortable. Sometimes you don't even uh, see that, but you really feel a very different vibe when you are kind of solitude or when you are kind of miserable, when you lost someone or you feel yourself sick or something. Then they need others help, they need others compassion, they need others company, and that time you can be really generous, and you can really be compassionate towards that person, and that is very very important. You can care for such people in so many different ways, maybe kind words, kind attitudes, also showing that you are genuinely caring for such people. And when you are also around them, they will feel nice and they will feel more comfortable and peaceful as well. And yeah, I mean, you can do it in many different ways. Like if you are a Buddhist, you can also chant certain suttas just to show your compassion. Maybe there are some people who don't know these things, then it's fine. But the way you show your compassion, the way you show your care, is all what matters to that person. And when similarly, when somebody is happier, you should also have that sympathetic joy. That also is really important. Like when someone is better off, that person has better comforts or whatever better than you, and then you also should not feel bothered, but you should feel happier. You should be able to enjoy that happiness with such people. And the metta is unconditional, immeasurable loving kindness, boundless loving kindness to all sentient beings. And then upekha, equanimity, is that when you have many differences in the world, your inner peace should not be shaken. Your mind should be unshaken. You should be able to maintain that inner peace without suffering from those outside storms. So that way, I think we can practice Brahma Vihara ourselves, and also we can help many people.
Mariah asks, when we hear that modern monastics become arahants, what are those claims based on? It's a similar one, I think, that we got last week. I think we got the same question last week. I don't know if I was here though. It's just what people say. People say all kinds of things, right? You hear stuff all the time, especially now on the fake news and all kinds of stuff. So, there's no real way to know. There's a saying that we have in the streets, in the hood, like game recognizes game, right? Game recognizes game. So here, enlightened beings recognize enlightened beings. Only an enlightened being recognizes other enlightened beings. People, maybe they see their teacher or someone with such good qualities, right? Maybe a lot, like we're talking a lot of loving kindness, compassion. Maybe they see the person has a lot of wisdom, right? They're able to teach the Dhamma very well. They see they have very good Vinaya, that monk, perfect Vinaya. They never have any faults in their conduct. So all these things, to a regular person, they'll think, oh, like this person arahant, but we don't know. Everyone likes to think that their teacher's the best too. So you have to remember that, right? Just like, oh, my dad's better than your dad. There's always that kind of thing going on. So we shouldn't focus on cults of charisma, and we should focus on the Dhamma. And if you're interested in those claims, then you can go study with that teacher and be there some time and observe and practice. And as the Buddha said in the end of the end of the Kalama Sutta, if it's good for me, good for others, good for all, promotes intelligence, directs towards nibbana, is not censored by the wise. Basically, then you can take it as, oh, this is good, and just keep practicing. So we see the truth in the fruits of the practice and the fruits of the guidance of the teacher.
Do you want to add something?
I think that's good, Bhante.
Yeah, I think yes. There can be other people who are saying or claiming to be arahants. We also are not in a position to judge, and unless you become an arahant yourself, you have that supernatural powers to read others' mind. Then probably you can. Otherwise, what we can really do is, other people can claim, but then if you live with them, if you stay with them for a while, you probably can see if they are faultless, right? So you can fake forever. You still have some loopholes, some mistakes, some errors could happen, and the person himself or herself knows it better than others. So the Buddha said, "Sabba papa sakaranang," don't do anything wrong. Kusala sampasampada, do all the good things. Sachitta pariyodapanang, purify your mind. And etang buddhana sasana. This is the quintessential essence of the Buddha Dhamma. So you yourself know, if you don't have any speck of dust, nothing wrong with your heart and purity in your conduct, you have to check yourself. And once somebody is an arahant, that person himself or herself has to go through many tests. You have to test yourself whether you are actually in that position. Genuinely, the real arahant person can know that he or she can be an arahant. Having said that, I also would like to say, even today, as long as the Dhamma is there, as long as you practice the Dhamma, the world is not empty of arahants. There could be arahants. You and I can become arahant too. So we have to work towards that.
Okay. Robert, I think this is from a previous asset. I mentioned a few weeks ago that contemplating sense restraint has been helpful. Can you describe the details of how you do it and maybe any insights gained? Yeah, I think what I was referring to when I was talking about sense restraint and the senses is just that contemplating the senses, I think, can be sometimes contemplating the aggregates can be a little bit more difficult because it can be abstract, right? Like contemplating these 5 categories is at least for me, it can be more difficult because you have to kind of think about, okay, is this, rupa, sanya, vedana, sankhara, etc. So then there's kind of that more, unless you're very familiar with it. Whereas the senses, it's something that is more easily accessible to us. It doesn't require a lot of thinking, right? We know what seeing is like, and we understand hearing and what that means. So there's that kind of immediate familiarity with the framework of the six senses, right? The salayata. And then with sense restraint, that's very practical as well. So sense restraint kind of mixes together the contemplation of the six senses with immediate practice. Because if we're getting caught up in the six senses, so if we see or hear or taste or smell or feel or think something that causes greed or aversion in the mind, then we know that to that extent we are taking the senses personally, right? So that's one of the things where anatta, and it becomes less conceptual because it's immediately related to what is arising in the mind, right? Because if greed is arising in the mind for something that you're seeing, well, then you're taking that personally. It's impossible for greed to arise if something is not taken personally. And the way to analogize this, the Buddha gives the simile of sticks in the monastery, and he says, if someone were to carry these sticks away, would you be upset, thinking, "Oh, they're carrying me away," something like this, right? And they say, "No, of course not, because those sticks are not. They're just sticks. They're impersonal, basically." And so the Buddha is trying to tell us that it's the same with the senses, like the faculty of seeing and vision and the things that we see. None of that is who we are. None of that is personal. But when we desire it, I want this and I have this and this is mine, that is all taking it personally. So sense restraint kind of sheds light on that, right? To what extent are we entangled and caught up in the net of the senses? And to that extent, we can see, okay, what is really going on here? What is really happening? And then we start to look into that experience of the senses. Whereas, like I said, with other frameworks like the aggregates, it can be a little bit more difficult. Maybe for other people, it's easier to think and frame their contemplation like that. But so I guess when I was talking about contemplating sense restraint in the senses, to me, it's about contemplating the nature of the senses and comparing that to how much are we involved in them, right? Can we let go of even a little bit of greed and aversion in relation to the senses and understand their nature to just a little bit with that? Is that something that we can do? And so looking into that and exploring that is something that I think that most people can try out. Most people can, they don't need to, understand a lot of intellectual Dhamma. They don't need to learn a lot about the Dhamma to do that. I think most people can contemplate their senses and see to what extent are they taking those personally. And also the Buddha gives a lot of similes for contemplating the senses, which can also be very useful, like the simile of the animals tied to a post or the animals tied to each other. Maybe too much to talk about right now, but I think maybe you're familiar, Robert, but that those kinds of similes, or the simile of the empty village, right? Those types of similes can make it really come to life and really pair together mindfulness practice, sense restraint, and contemplation of the senses in terms of non-self and impermanence and so on. So I think that that's kind of what I was referring to, if that's of any help. Venerables, maybe do you have anything about the senses and sense restraint?
I just think the things that we do, like on the Sila day, when you take 8 precepts, so that's a good way to practice sense restraint, because at least for that day, you're not going to be giving into the entertainment from sights, sounds, and smells, and beautifying the body and adorning the body. And also practicing moderation in eating is a good way. One of the hardest ways to restrain, or one of the most difficult things to restrain, is our appetite for taste. So then also you can, if you're taking the 8 precepts, then you'll skip on the evening. So I think there's so many benefits if you can take up the 8 precepts from time to time. It'll also give you a way to, in a very kind of like tangible way, to work with the senses. That if you don't have enough practice with the senses directly and able to see that, in the seeing and hearing, in the heard and things like that, this might be a little bit more easier until you gain access to being able to see how you react to seeing and tasting and touching, and going back to what I said earlier about Vedana and how the unpleasantness arises, and then the greed, hatred, delusion, clinging, grasping, and all the suffering that comes there.
And S has another question. Are all mundane happiness being defined as sensual pleasures? Or are there other types of happiness that are neither sensual pleasures nor nirvana that lay people can pursue? Thank you.
There's a sutta about all the different types of feelings, Vedana. And there's pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, worldly, unworldly, material, immaterial, based on pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral based on the eye, on the ear, on the nose, on the tongue. All like it's like over 100. Some of them, So like 1/3 of those are pleasant feelings, but not all of them are sensual. Even the famous declaration that the Bodhisattva made once he finished practicing, self-mortification with his 5 ascetic friends, and he had that memory of when he went into jhana, right? He said, "Why was I scared of this pleasure if it's non-sensual? The pleasure of jhana is not a sensual pleasure. It's a blameless pleasure. So why was I scared of this?" Right? So there's these other kind of things. I mean, jhana is not exclusive to monastics. It's something that anyone can cultivate. There's other heavenly pleasures too, right? Maybe not directly accessible to you at this moment, but through the practice of Brahma Viharas, that's what they're called, Brahma Viharas, right? Divine dwellings. So there is other ones that are accessible. I don't remember the name of the sutta right now, but yes, there's a bunch of types of pleasures, worldly and unworldly, and there's the highest supreme pleasure, the Nibbanam Paramam Sukham, right? The highest pleasure of Nibbana. There's a pleasure of not having even feeling, right? When Sanya and Vedana are not present, there's the pleasure of no Sanya and Vedana, which is of the, what do you call it? Usually people call the 9th jhana. So there's also a pleasure there where there's actually no pleasure, no feeling. That's the pleasure, that there's no feeling. So yes, there's so many. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember Mahanidesa. There is one particular chapter called Kama Sutta Nidesa. There are 16 chapters, and in Kama Sutta Nidesa, it's all about the sensual pleasures. And then there are 2 main categories. One is Vattu Kama, those material sensual pleasures. And then Kilesa Kama, those are more of intangible, internal sensual pleasures. So they are all defilements in a way. So 44, I noticed that under the Vattu Kama, the external factors, like when you have some of the assets. For example, you have a lot of property, you have maybe good farm, or some other, even like servants and other things, cattle and all those things can be also part of the Vattu Kama, or this material sensual pleasures that you have, especially the lay people. They all have these things. And then internally also you have a lot of things as sensual pleasures. You want to achieve this, you want to do this to satisfy your insatiable ego. There are many things. And then eventually what's more important, in the sutta, in the book, it says, um, just like the robbers can take away things from you, and the fire can take away things from you, the water can take away things from you. So eventually, if you do not enjoy yourself those things, plus if you do not practice generosity by helping others, when you have something excess, you can actually give it to others, practice donate generosity, donate to others, to help others. Then they will feel good, they will also say good things about you. And so when you die someday, they will always appreciate you. So you not only enjoying your life, but also practicing generosity, helping the community. So that is one way of working with the sensual pleasures. Then you enjoy your life because you have those things, and then you also help others. That is one way of doing, maintaining, balancing things when you have a lot of things. So sensual pleasures, apart from the high, lofty, supramundane happinesses like jhana or other the nibbana, or maybe the good health, or the things like that. These things are also there to make you a happy person, and then you live like a happy, healthy, good person. Then your reputation will go high, and you will also gain a lot of merits. Okay.
Okay. Hima has a question. How to make sure that the dream I am pursuing is what I'm truly gifted and specialized in?
I think you need to analyze too, right? For example, what kind of job, what kind of profession you're doing. For example, in Noble Eightfold Path, we have Sama Ajiva, or a right livelihood. So there are certain professions that you should avoid. Let us say, like Satta Vanijja, Sattha Vanijja, Visa Vanijja, Majja Vanijja, Mansa Vanijja, different kinds of businesses that you should avoid, different kinds of livelihoods that you should avoid, like animal husbandry, or like poison, like a lot of things that we can easily earn money today, maybe by engaging in these things, like selling weapons, selling drugs. They are easy money, but they can also harm yourself and harm others. So you have to be aware of those things, and not to promote or not to engage in such things can be helpful. So Satta Vanijja is one, and Sattha Vanijja is the the weapons and all these things. If you can be rich by practicing these things and by engaging in these things, they are not going to surely help you. Recently, I went to Riverside when I was in Los Angeles. Went to Riverside Airport Museum, and I saw a huge airplane, and it was mentioned there that the atomic bomb was dropped by that particular plane. And the atomic bomb was also there, maybe a replica of it, maybe. But even maybe the pilot himself didn't know that he was dropping a bomb like that to make such a devastating impact. Even today, people generation to generation suffer from that mass destructive weapon. People produce chemical weapons, people use chemical fertilizers, people do many things to make easy money. And also drug business also is easy, but look how the young people, the other people, have lost their health, lost their family life, lost their social life, lost everything. So what is the point by doing all these things? So you have to be careful. Satta Vanijja, Sattha Vanijja, Visa Vanijja is the poison business. That is chemical fertilizer probably. And then Mansa Vanijja, human trafficking. And then yeah, these are some of the businesses that we should avoid. So when you select your dream, you pursue your dream in order to make sure that it doesn't harm yourself, it doesn't harm other, it doesn't harm both of you. Just like in Ambulattik Rahuluvada Sutta, the Buddha mentioned, what to do good, what should be the right way. So your navigation should be right. When your navigation is right, you know where to go, how to go. You know all the dangers that are lying ahead of you. You know your path very clearly. What is right, what is wrong, you should know. And accordingly, you can plan, you can pursue your dream. Then you will know yourself, you will be confident of yourself as a gifted and a specialized person. You can be a truly wonderful human being so that you can help the world for sure.
Okay. Rebecca asks, in Majjhima Nikaya 117, the Buddha speaks about two types of right view, one that is affected by taints and one that is taintless and supramundane. Could you explain the difference for me? Well, I think that this is the Mahachatari Sutta, and they talk about the Lokya Magga and the Lokuttara Magga. And there sometimes this is understood in different ways. My understanding of it, maybe the Venerables could also, but my understanding of it is that primarily it's talking about a distinction that is also made in the Abhidhamma, when basically the Lokuttara Magga refers to when the Noble Eightfold Path actually works and produces some level of enlightenment, some kind of transcendental, uh, basically, stage of enlightenment in the person who's practicing the path. So, for example, most people who are practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, if they're just practicing it, they're just learning the Dhamma, and they're just practicing their Sila, and they're supposed to just be holding the right view that, for example, there is Kamma, right? Like Ati Kamma, not Nati Kamma. So there is Kamma, and there is Phala, and there is this life and the afterlife. And that basically is just what we call mundane, sometimes, right view, right? Lokiya, which means of this world, of the world. And what that means is that it's not anything transcendental, right? That's not the view of an arahant. That's not the view of a non-returner or once-returner or stream enterer. But it is a view that's necessary to hold while we're walking the path. And then the Lokuttara Magga, the path that transcends the world, would be the path that arises when someone actually, if and when someone does actually attain right view of a noble one, something that is noble, which means it's transcendental. It transcends the world. And, this would include all the path factors, basically, like the path factor of, for example, right intention. So the next one on the path, right? Samma Sankappa. It says that Lokuttara Samma Sankappa is basically the Samma Sankappa, the right intention or the right thought of someone who does have the transcendental path. So it's not necessarily defined differently, but it's referring to the path when it actually makes a transformation in someone. And another way of taking this, which is maybe slightly different, but maybe you can, maybe sometimes more applicable in terms of working with these concepts, is sometimes I've heard, for example, Bhante Gunaratana, he's a Sri Lankan monastic, he'll sometimes talk about the difference between punya and kusala. And this isn't necessarily a technical difference. Sometimes kusala just means punya. They're not necessarily separate. But one way of talking about it is like, we can practice good deeds in order to get a good rebirth, right? Just to be happy. And this is when we think, for example, I'm going to follow my sila, I'm going to follow my precepts in order to feel happy for myself in this life and in a future life. And that we could call just punya. So basically, you just want to acquire and accrue happiness. And this is not a bad thing, right? This is something that is good. And the Buddha says this is necessary. We can't not do good deeds and practice the Dhamma. So this is necessary. But it's lokya. It's of the world. So someone who does, they do meritorious deeds, just thinking they want to be happy and they want to have a good rebirth and a good life, they will just be reborn. They will just continue to be reborn in the world. And then one way of talking about kusala is basically you do it in a way, you do good deeds in a way that is skillful, in a way that is doing good deeds in order to escape kamma, right? Sometimes this is called the kamma for the end of kamma, right? The kamma that leads to the end of kamma. And this would be lokuttara. So you do something good, but not to receive a good rebirth, but in order to purify your mind so that you let go of rebirth, you let go of the world, you transcend the world, lokuttara. So that's another way of thinking about it. Like, is the view you're holding and the actions you're doing and your sila, samadhi, panya, that practice that you're developing, is it in order to have a good rebirth, in order to have a good life in this world for yourself? Or is it to transcend the world, to let go of the world? That's one way of, maybe it's helpful. I don't know if that's satisfying.
In Majjhima Nikaya, there's another sutta you can refer to, that is called Samma Ditti Sutta, right view, in which Venerable Sariputta explained 16 ways to generate right view. I think that can also be very helpful. Yesterday we were chanting, remember we were chanting Noble Eightfold Path?
Yes.
I think that was really wonderful.
Mm.
I felt really good because we were chanting the Noble Eightfold Path in detail, and then immediately after that we went to meditation. And that way we kind of, had that Loki and Lokuttara kind of experience, because knowing these facts are also important. So for our mundane world, worldly knowledge, we need to know the Dhamma. You need to know the path. So when you know what is right view, what is right speech, what is right action, what is right livelihood, what is right concentration, all these things are really important to know. And then you practice, you meditate, and in that meditative mode, when you go deep into that, if you practice longer, you can really feel a very different experience, and you will go into a different realm. So keep practicing both ways. In your day-to-day life, you also need to know what you do, what you are doing, right and wrong, you need to know. And then in your meditation, you can also be more mindful about those minor mistakes, simple or little things that you might do as mistakes. I remember, like, when I was a little Samanera, novice monk, I heard Anumattesu vajjesu bhayadassave sikkata sikkapadesu. We need to be scared of even those slightest mistakes that we do. Sometimes you really focus on very, very big mistakes. In simple, light or minor mistakes, you don't really care that much. You don't pay attention to that much. So these things are really, really important too. So focus on those things can be also helpful, and balance between Lokiya Lokuttara or mundane supramundane can always be helpful to enhance your right view. Right view is just like the navigation you have in your car. So when you have the navigation, you will be directed to your destination, um, alarming you of the upcoming dangers, and so that you can, escape the wrong exits, and also escape some of the accidents or something, other traffic or something, that will take you through the right way and easiest and the fastest way possible to your destination. So if you have the right way, right view, your spiritual path will be very clear to you. You know exactly what to do, what not to do. You know what is right, you know what is wrong. Then it is so much easier for you to work on your path.
Okay. And then S asks, oops, is it a good thing to have some level of pressure in life? I tend to live a life without any pressure, but it may lead to inactiveness. How to balance between pressure and relaxing in daily life? Thanks.
Everyone's just looking at me. Yeah, so pressure kind of has a negative connotation to it, right? So we can talk about like we should have some sort of sense of that there are things that need to be done, right? There are things that need to be done. So in the same way that probably in the morning we think like, well, I need to brush my teeth, I need to shower, I need to do these things, I need to throw out the trash, I need to prepare my food, I need to do my laundry. All these are things that need to be done, right? It's we just can't neglect them. If we neglect them, then we'll have to face the consequences. So we also have to kind of not we have to extend that beyond just today and think about next week and next month and next year, right? And not only this life but future lives, and think about, well, what are those things that I'm being negligent in, and be diligent instead. I mean, that's probably the most one of the most important things that we need to remember when we're practicing Dhamma is this sense of having being diligent, right? Of not leaving things for later and doing what needs to be done. So I don't think necessarily you need pressure, because that kind of makes me think of like, well, I need something to make me feel bad, right? Like I need to think about the consequences, and that's there. It can be skillful at times to think about the negative consequences, but I just like to think about it like, oh, there's these things that are very nice that are still left to be done on the path that I need to cultivate, that are for my benefit and the benefit of others and the benefit of both, and that contribute to my own well-being and the well-being of my community, my friends, my family, and the Sangha, and all beings throughout the entire universe. So I like to kind of get my motivation from these positive aspects of the path, and that usually moves me to do all these things, because once I'm doing these things, I find myself very happy. I find myself already enjoying participating in wholesome deeds and giving and sharing and helping others and doing all the things that I need to do, even taking care of myself. So when people come and they're like, oh, that monk, he's not all dirty and hairy or like looking weird or smelly monk, they're like, oh, this monk takes care of himself. And that's also pleasing to people. So then I usually like to think about that. Like, how is this contributing to my own well-being, to the future well-being of myself and all beings, and things like that. So there's usually where I get my incentive, the incentive to do the things that I need to do and not fall into negligence, and have energy for the practice.
I remember once there was an assembly of the monks. All of them were great monks, and among them there were other Arahanta monks and also non-Arahanta, just mundane Putujana monks, what we call. And then there was a great assembly of Devas, celestial beings, and they were all coming to pay respect to the Buddha and those great monks. And it is said the entire sky was so full of celestial beings, heavenly beings. And then the Buddha saw them, and he asked the monks, if you want to see them, you need to practice meditation. so so the monks started practicing, and then they kept diligently working on their meditation, and eventually they saw those beautiful, amazing heavenly beings, it is said. Everything in life, I think, is not a cake of walk. I mean, what do you call cakewalk? um, it comes to us. Of course, if you have done some good deeds in your past, some people get them, but many of us have to be diligent, have to really work hard to achieve your goal. If you are a student, you really have to work hard. You need to study hard. You need to concentrate. You need to focus. And then only you can achieve something. If you want to go above average, you want to achieve something better than your classmates, then you have to study 1 hour before the other student. If they wake up at 6, you have to wake up at 5. If they go to bed at 9, you have to go to bed at 10. You have to study even longer. And that's how you need to achieve that, accomplish that um, extra achievement, accomplishment in your mundane life. I remember There is a beautiful Sanskrit sloka. Udyamena hi siddhyanti karyani na mano ratai nahi suktasya singhasya pravishanti mukhe mruga. You know, the targets in our life, the achievements in life will not just happen to us just like that. We need to really work hard to achieve those goals. Just like a lion. Lion is the king of the jungle, right? But even then, even if you are the king of the jungle, if you don't go out for hunting, those deer will not come to your mouth. You have to really work hard. If you lay down, if you become lazy, oh, I am the king, so you should come to me, nobody will come to you just like that. You have to work hard to achieve your goals. In Buddhism, we have two paramitas called Virya Paramita and Adhitthana Paramita. Virya Paramita means you have to make a lot of effort. You have to make efforts in fourfold ways. How to get rid of those, unwholesome things in yourself, and then how to, um, uh, get rid of those unwholesome things in the others. Sometimes you want to follow others. Bad habits or something. Yeah, you have to make an effort not to be addicted to these things. For example, if you are a young teenager, a lot of people are very interested in so much into video games. So now you have to make an effort. Sometimes your friends may be playing with the smartphone or tab or something, so they are playing a lot of games, and so you want to follow their trends, and you don't know where will you end up. So you have to make some effort, not to be a trend follower, but you need to make a trendsetter positively, just like the Buddha did. So we all are following, and we are all being benefited by following his wonderful guidance and teaching. You need to make some effort, and you need to be determined until you achieve your goal. You're not stepping back like the Buddha did. When he said, even though my bones and all the things in me will go away, or what do you call
Sure.
yeah, what do you call decay or whatever, I'm not going to step, I'm not going to move. So I will keep meditating until I achieve my final goal. So just like that, they also worked so hard. We all have our mundane goal, spiritual goal. We have to make some effort. We have to really be determined if we want to achieve that extra accomplishment in our life.
Ante, where's that shloka from?
That is from Sanskrit book. Yeah, when we were learning Sanskrit, I remember like Sanskrit. There are small books that we were learning. Yeah, lot of beautiful Hitopadesha and other Sanskrit Bala Avadarsha. We have Bala Adarsha and also Sanskrit Shikshaka. There we had those beautiful uh, small little sayings, wise sayings.
Okay, Hema, related question, kind of, asks, should we do a job just for money, or should we at least try a job that may not be as payable, but is really what we are pursuing?
Bante, I think about the Sigalovada Sutta, where it really focuses on, the layperson's life, since I guess that's the kind of theme today, right? Like the lay life. And it talks about our duties, our responsibilities. So we, according to the Buddha, we have responsibilities and duties towards our family, our community. It talks about the responsibilities of a teacher to a student to a teacher, an employer to an employee to an employer, a religious person like monks to the lay people and lay people to the monks, like a father to wife and wife to husband, and kids to parents and parents to kids. All these responsibilities. Even after we were just talking about it earlier in the morning when I gave my talk, we even have responsibilities to people that are not here anymore, that have passed away, right? Even that we don't know. The Buddha said there's somebody departed that you don't even know about, maybe from other lives, and they're still in the preta world, in the Peta world, or one of your cousins passed away, you don't even know about it yet. So we have to think about first, how can I serve others actually? When we think about a career or pursuing a job or anything, our first thing is like, how is this serving others? How is this serving my family? How is this serving my community? How can I keep fulfilling my responsibilities to all the people in the world and sentient beings? I think, there's the place that we should come from, instead of like, what's good for me? What do I want? What's going to fulfill me? What do I like? Like I, me, myself, and mine, kind of things. And it's good if we can kind of have our cake and eat it too, right? If it happens that we love serving others in a certain way, and that, if you love art, then you're like, oh, I'll become an art therapist. I'll teach art. I'll be a school art teacher. Then I can serve others and do art at the same time. And yes, as a school art teacher, you won't be making much money. It's like that, the other option you gave, right? You have a job, but you don't make much money as a school art teacher. But it's a very fulfilling job. It's a very beautiful job. Also very difficult, being a school teacher nowadays, for many reasons. So yes, it should. I think the primary thing should be instead of the bad livelihoods, good livelihoods. And what is a good livelihood? A good livelihood is just not one where you avoid harm, but one where you're actually doing good and contributing to society too, right? So I think these are kind of things that we need to think about when we think about what to pursue. Yeah, money is not necessarily the most important thing. It's about how can we contribute for the benefit and well-being of all beings.
Prairie asks, from a Buddhist point of view, how to overcome cowardice? Okay, well, what immediately comes to mind for me with this is cowardice basically means fear, right? It's fear. And the Buddha has a lot to talk about fear, what we call bhaya. So bhaya, there's even a sutta called the Bhaya Bhedava Sutta, where the Buddha talks about his experience of fear and cowardice, basically, where maybe you're practicing maybe you're practicing in the jungle and you hear a noise rustling and you think, oh no, is that a ghost? Is that a lion? Is that a snake? And this might not be so, maybe you're not talking about that type of fear, but it's related, right? This kind of courage to go out into the jungle and practice in the midst of these animals. It's the same type of courage to go out and speak in public on a stage. And, personally, I don't know if this is true, but I think probably as human beings, a lot of it's probably related. Like we evolved historically to be afraid of certain things, right? And I think a lot of our anxiety, it's kind of also our body is telling us to be afraid. And sometimes our mind gets confused with what we should be afraid of. So that type of cowardice, we should really just think about it as the same type of fear as fear of the dark, fear of monsters under your bed, fear of, a snake, fear of anything that you might be afraid of, and just realize this is the exact same thing. Sometimes we can, especially, if we're older, maybe we think that adult fears are different from children's fears, or courage is something different from just a mundane thing. But really, I think it's all the same. It's all the same. Now, the other thing I would add to this, though, is cowardice, sometimes it doesn't need to be overcome from a Buddhist perspective, right? Like if we're talking about, I'm going to be courageous and I'm going to go beat everybody up, that type of courage can sometimes lead to folly. It can sometimes be foolish because we think, I'm invincible, I'm going to do whatever I want and impose my will on other people or on this situation. And sometimes that's not the right response, right? Sometimes we need to replace courage with compassion, or we need to replace courage with receptivity, with listening, like that type of quality of, I'm not going to be courageous, I'm just going to be fearless, right? I'm not going to be courageous, I'm just going to be fearless. I'm going to be stable. So sometimes what I mean is like courage can be very hyped up, very energetic, and a little bit unskillful. But fearlessness, now that is good, right? We don't need to be fearful. We can be fearless. And how do you eliminate that? Well, mindfulness and, looking at your mind, as the venerables have talked about, satipatthana, and observing, okay, why is this fear arising, and what does it feel like in my body? What does it feel like, just the emotional tone of it without the thoughts that are about it, right? So just kind of observing the fear, observing it, understanding, oh, this is fear, and trying to have compassion for yourself if the fear is unnecessary, like, oh, this fear is trying to protect me, right? So like, let's say you're in the jungle and you experience fear. One way of thinking about that is, oh, this fear is arising because my mind doesn't want me to be in danger. So, oh, thank you, fear. That's so kind of you to try to protect me from the scary animals and the ghosts. And but then you think, but I understand now. I understand that it's dangerous. So now that you've let me know, I understand. You don't need to keep telling me, right? So we can just tell the fear, like, oh, I hear you, fear. And now that I hear you, you don't need to say it again. So really not trying to push the fear away, but understanding it. Okay, fear, it has this feeling in my body. It has this tone to it. It's arising because of this. And once we understand and we see and we listen to that fear, we don't need to be the victims of fear, right? We understand the fear. And I would say that really fear has power because we don't understand, right? This is kind of phrase that we are most afraid of what we don't know. And I would say that really fear arises from not knowing fear. It's kind of like the boogeyman, the scary fear that you're kind of afraid, but you don't quite see the nature of fear itself. So it keeps power over us. But if we just see, this is just fear, this is just a response, this is just not wanting to be hurt, this is not wanting to be in danger, then we can react and respond more appropriately, like this. Okay, if I don't want to be hurt, if I have fear, it'll be more difficult to respond with mindfulness because fear will be clouding my mind. So if I really don't want to be hurt, if I really don't want to be in danger, this fear will be an obstacle. So then we acknowledge the fear and we try to respond with more mindfulness and let go of that. And that the reason I say that is it should help the fear, right? If we understand fear is arising to avoid harm, we hear that, and then we do what we need to do to avoid harm, we should be less afraid of harm by definition, naturally. Those are a few thoughts that arise for cowardice and fear. That's good. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of questions.
Yeah, maybe we want to like get through a little bit faster.
Should we do the
Yeah.
Zen answers? Okay, very good. Okay, Anthony. Oops. What is the best way to support people that are dying? That's
By showing your loving kindness, compassion. If the dying person is a Buddhist, you can also maybe do some chantings, because chanting can also give kind of a support to the dying person. Sometimes even for an animal, we used to do that. We do pray for them, and we do chant, and so that the animals can also feel calm and peaceful. Especially when somebody is dying, their mind is more restless, maybe panic. Unless you are actually a practitioner, you will be overwhelmed with fear, as Venerable said. So fear can be something that really can haunt, and it can really dismantle our courage, our even immune system. So you will be in Buddhism. I remember, like in some countries, like in Sri Lanka, we used to have a book called Punya Potaka, where we record all the good merits that you do. And so when somebody is dying and someone else, maybe a grandson or granddaughter or somebody, reads those things for that person to, make that person feel happy. Or you did so many good things in the past. So you can remind them all those wholesome things that they did. To make that person is comfortable, we can do in different ways. Like when somebody is sick, there are certain suttas that you can chant. But when somebody is dying, you can also practice, chant like Metta Sutta, Karaniya Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness. Sometimes even Bojjhanga Suttas, Girimananda Sutta, and those suttas can also be helpful. Practicing you yourself, sending loving kindness to that person who is dying. So, in order to maintain his or her inner peace during that final moment is important. You should not force in giving food or feeding. You should actually let that person live comfortably and peacefully. That's really important. And also, everyone in the family should be more compassionate, kind, and also show your presence there, so that person also will feel little better. Yeah.
Mariah has a good question. I have heard that the Buddha never taught that there is or is not a self, but that he taught not self. Is this correct? And can you elaborate on the differences between these two positions? So, do you know about this?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
common thing that
Yeah.
I've heard. It's mostly Westerners saying this.
Hmm.
I don't hear this in Asia at all. And yeah, it's kind of like because of the translation issue. The translation issue, people say the Buddha taught non-self or no self, and so they take that to mean like that's not necessarily denying that there is a self. That's like there's like different categories now, right? There's like the not self, there is actually no self, and then there's self. And so like there's these three categories. And the Buddha didn't teach that there was actually no self. He taught non-self, right? That like there's a self, but like the seeing, the tasting, the touching, the thinking, all these things, I'm not those things, You're this other kind of thing, which kind of that view always confused me, the one that's of the not self, because it kind of sneaks in a self somewhere in there. That's what I feel like it's doing. It's sneaking in a self somewhere in there, right? It's saying, yeah, all these things here are not the self, but there's like some other self somewhere else that's the real self. So I feel like, yeah, it's kind of like doing that little trick on people. But my understanding from what I read, there's nothing the Buddha says that can be called a self. Nothing that can be called a self, right? So if you're talking about the Buddha deny that, in this kind of conventional sense, the way we use these words, right, as calling, like, there's a car there, there's a person here. Of course, we don't deny that, right? If you can deny that there's a if you're standing in the middle of the street, you can deny that there's not a car coming, and eventually that car's going to come and hit you, and it didn't do you any good to deny it. So it's not that kind of denial, right? We're not denying the obvious of what's going on in the world. But what is being denied is this kind of essence or eternal self or permanent self or any type of thing that's really a self. There really is no self. There's all these other things, but none of them are self, right? And that doesn't give us permission to introduce like this other kind of self. But I think it's very important sometimes when we hear these arguments to know where they're coming from, you know? And sometimes because I read stuff in like Buddhist magazines, and they'll say, oh, many Buddhists don't believe in rebirth. I'm like, you mean Western Buddhists? That's what you mean. Like, I never heard any Asian person say that they don't believe. Any Asian Buddhists say that, right? But they make it seem like it's a popular view in Buddhism. Like, no, it's just like kind of well-off Western people, who do Buddhism. They kind of, that's their belief, but you don't really find that with traditional Buddhists. So I think it's also important, to kind of the context. Even when we read the suttas, we have to kind of think about the context of in which they're taught, right? And I was talking about this the other day when it comes to anatta, non-self, that during the time of the Buddha, it appears from the suttas that the Brahmins at that time had three claims, right? That there is a self, that it's permanent, and that it's blissful. So then the Buddha has like an antithesis, right? Like a counter argument of his own point of view of how the world is. He goes, no, actually, like all things are impermanent, they're unsatisfactory, and there is no self. So this kind of formulation of non-self that we get of the three characteristics of reality, the tilakkhana, are really like a rebuttal of the Brahmin perspective. It's kind of like these three counterpoints to the Brahmins' 3 points that they had at that time, right? So what were the Brahmins' point? That there is a self, and the Buddha saying like, no, there is no self. So it's very obvious when you understand within that context what no self means when you read from the suttas. At least to me, it becomes very obvious.
Rary asks, to immerse oneself in the good memories from the past just to enjoy some happy hours, is it a kind of delusion? So just remembering good things to be happy.
Remembering good things can be positive, because especially when you are sick or like in dying hours, you can be positive, you can be happier. What is wrong with being by being happy? You can be happy. When you are happy, when you smile, what happens to you? Your bloodstream can be good, your brain waves can be better, your entire system can be better. So I don't think there is anything wrong in being happy, but then you also need to know that the impermanence and the final for final liberation, those things can be hindrances. But having said that, in order to live our life, we need to be happy. You need to eat good food, you need to do exercise, you need to study, you need to do a good job, you need to earn money. All these things are important too, like for a mundane life. You can say, oh, this is like delusion, this is like not so important. And so if you don't do anything like that, you won't be able to live your life. So we need to get rid of this samsara, yes, but in order to do that, we need to take care of this body too. So as we practice loving kindness to every sentient being, you also have to take care of yourself, and that's important. And so balance between the worldly life and the supramundane life, spiritual life, and you need to balance. You need to have both of them. As I think we had quite a few questions regarding this issue too, like how to deal with that what do you call Paramatta Satya and Sammuti Satya, what we call conventional truth and the absolute truth. There are two things. Even the Buddha had to deal with these things. He had to live in this world. So even though he was a liberated one, enlightened one, he had to eat food. He had to take medicine. And he saw people like Venerable Ananda. When he never addressed him as five aggregates. He did not address, hello, five aggregates, how are you? He didn't say that. He said, Venerable Ananda. And he called Sariputta. So the Sammuti Satya, the conventional truth, also is there in this world. And then they already know that there is something called Paramatta Satya, the absolute truth. They know it. That's important too. So in between, balancing these things can be very helpful. Okay.
Okay. Shima Gomez says, how would causing a schism in the Sangha, one of the most critical and wholesome actions, look in a non-monastic Sangha? Yeah, so this is a good question. And the answer is that it doesn't look like anything. It's impossible because so there's two parts to this. One is that in modern days, I think especially in the West, probably, I don't think it happens in maybe Asia, but
No.
especially in the West, the word Sangha, people use it to mean like a community of meditators. Like if a bunch of lay people meet up on Tuesday and they meditate, that's the Sangha. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfect. And I know that people, they use it as a sense of community. So I'm not going to say, words are flexible, words change. There's nothing wrong with it. But we need to understand that that's not what the word Sangha means in the Pali Suttas and in traditional Buddhist countries. If you use the word Sangha, it means the monastic Sangha specifically. It doesn't mean any community like in general. It means a religious order. So a religious order specifically in this case, of mendicants, like a Buddhist religious order, right? And so it's impossible for, like when the Buddha says a schism in the Sangha, he specifically means the religious order that he established of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. And so it's impossible for someone who, it's impossible for a schism in another order. Like, let's say that you work at McDonald's and you get a bunch of your coworkers to start a union against your manager. You're not starting a schism in the Sangha.
Probably starting a good idea.
Yeah, so it's, if you divide a community, that's not the same thing as a schism in the Sangha. A schism in the Sangha is specifically dividing the Buddhist monastic Sangha. And the other part of this question is that actually in the Vinaya, like in the Kandakas, they're called, so the chapters on the monastic rules, but specifically the details of monastic life, it actually says that it's impossible for a layperson to start a schism in the Sangha no matter how hard they try. And the reason it says that is because a schism in the Sangha is actually a Sangha Kamma. Like it's an official procedure done by another Sangha member to basically no longer recite the Patimokkha with people living in the same monastery or the same, what we call Sima. So in order to do it, you have to be a Sangha member. It's an internal conflict. It's not something that someone outside the Sangha can do. It's something that has to happen inside the Sangha. So like one part of the Sangha community decides that they're going to split off, and it can't be done by someone outside. Just like, I can't make you get divorced. It doesn't make sense. You can only get divorced in your marriage because that's an internal agreement. So you don't need to worry about an internal schism, which is a relief. Okay. Hima says, are good people more easily to be taken advantage of by bad people? If so, what to do?
I don't know if good people are more likely to be taken advantage by bad people, but it's been pointed out to me by some of my community members that at times I'm a bit, I don't want to say naive, but I give people the benefit of the doubt too much, and it's played out in funny ways. I'll tell a funny story. So a couple of years ago, when I was staying by myself at a temple in Palmdale, Bante's probably been to our Palmdale Center, and one of my friends wanted to take me to get some food, so we went into Trader Joe's, and we're waiting in line, and then I see this young person go into one of the registers and call me over, right? And I tell my friend, let's go, and I'm walking, but my friend doesn't follow, and he's laughing, and I look again, and it's just like I didn't realize it was like a 12 or 13-year-old kid, and he's laughing at me, and then he runs away, and I just saw a person walk there, like wave at me to come. He was behind the register. I was like, oh, maybe it's just a young person. Sometimes they have young people like 16 working there, no big deal. But I just went for it, and then he was laughing and I laughed at it too. I didn't feel offended. So, I didn't feel offended. So I felt there was no offense. But to outside people, it seemed like, oh, he got taken advantage of. In order for me to be taken advantage of, I need to feel that I was taken advantage of too, right? So if people do stuff to you, there's no offense if you don't take an offense. Kind of like when the Buddha was insulted, and then the Buddha gives him the simile of like the gift. He goes, oh, if someone brings you a gift and the person doesn't receive it, whose gift it is? Oh, the person who gave it, right? This is my gift. Okay. In the same way, if you take advantage of me or whatever you want to call it, like if I don't perceive it that way, then I wasn't taken advantage of. So if you're a good person, you won't be offended to begin with, even though all the people might criticize you for being naive and things like that. So that's happened to me on various occasions. Sometimes even when people are treating me actually very disrespectfully. Actually, again, with that friend too, and he pointed it out. It's like, oh, that person was very disrespectful. And I was like, maybe they were in a hurry, And he's like, you're always giving people excuses. And I was like, well, I don't feel disrespected. So this is all just to say, like, it's very subjective. It's a very subjective thing. And doesn't necessarily mean that bad people will take advantage of you. Maybe just regular people might be doing things and other people might perceive it like they're taking advantage of you. So I wouldn't worry personally too much about it. I haven't really seen any serious consequences to me preferring to give people the benefit of the doubt and be nice to them. Nothing but good things, actually.
Okay, Amit has a question. How do we apply the 4 bases of power, I think this is the Iddhipada, to our meditation? I am working on developing loving kindness and becoming a better and calmer person.
Want to explain?
Me? Yeah. Okay, the 4 iddhipada. So I'll try to be relatively brief. So the 4 are the 4 qualities. We have, yeah.
Chanda Chitta Vidya Vimansa.
Thank you, Bhakti. So chanda is, we can say enthusiasm or desire or zeal. Chanda is, I'm trying to remember it's chanda samadhi padhana no, samadhi, chanda samadhi padhana sankhara iddhipada, right? I think that's the full compound. So it's basically using this quality to develop the mind into samadhi. So using a particular quality in order to develop samadhi by what we say padhana sankhara. So basically the striving, like putting forth this intention and mental inclination, striving and developing the mind, using the quality in order to develop samadhi. And the 4 qualities, as Venerable said, so chanda is enthusiasm. So what this would look like, for example, would be when you meditate, you have to be enthusiastic about meditating, right? You have to want to meditate. You have to want to develop the mind. You have to want to make progress. And that's chanda. So if your meditation isn't going well, you build more enthusiasm or desire to progress. And then you put forth energy. So if you want to do something, you're going to apply yourself to it, right? You're going to put forth energy. And once you put forth energy, then the next one is chitta, which sometimes, it's a little bit difficult. There's many opinions on what this means. But you could say chitta here basically means the focusing of the mind, right? The mind applying itself. I remember there's a Bhante Katukudanda Jnanananda, who's Sri Lankan, and he said that the iddhipadas, we find them in the definition of right effort. So we say chandang janeti vayamati vidyang arabhati chittang paganhati padahati. So chittang paganhati is like applying the mind. So this is kind of like focusing or really putting your mind on the task. So once you want to do the task, you really are interested in your meditation. Then you start to have all this energy come up and you start just naturally applying yourself to the meditation, and your mind will be applied towards it. Your mind will be focused. It will be more concentrated. It will be more, focused. And then there's vimamsa, which is investigation or inquiry. And this is that once you are interested, energetic, focused in your meditation, you can start to actually see what's going on. You can actually understand your mind. You can start to investigate your mind and then develop where you see the weakness and you see how to develop it. And then you follow that path of investigation all the way to the end. So it's a way of basically progressively building, starting with just basic interest and enthusiasm, and then applying that all the way towards investigating your own meditation with this energy and focus. That's a kind of short answer maybe of how that might kind of look. Okay, S asks, during rebirth process, does one life starting mean another life is ending somewhere else?
It is like the lamp. So there is no gap between the flame and the candle, for example. And also, I think it is the process of Paticca that you need to know in Buddhism. So there is no permanent soul or something that is transmitting from one life to another, but that is the causes and conditions. And death also is just like that. You die. It's just a moment, just another chitta. Like we also die every moment. We call kanika marana, or momentary. Every single moment. Right now, when I talk, I die many times. My cells, born and reborn, and so we constantly doing it like this, and so there is no permanent entity that goes to from one life to another. But that is you need to know that life, um, the birth and the life, or jati and the marana, are also part of this circle of transmigration, and nothing called uh, something like permanent one life or another life. So it's constantly being born and reborn, and that is what the Buddha actually said when we decode the mystery of this circle of transmigration. You really can get out of this samsara, unless otherwise we will all be engaged in the circle, in the process of jati jara marana, that process.
Bhante, I think he's asking, in order for you to be reborn, some other being needs to die. So like there's this place, right? In order for you to take that place, someone else needs to die for you to take that place. That's what he's asking. Does that need to happen?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely not. Yeah. Just the process of life and death. According to Buddhism, I think that is important.
Yeah, I haven't seen any place where the Buddha says there's a limited amount of slots, right? And in order for you to go from one place to another, you have to like that person needs to vacate their slot for you to take their slot. Like no.
Then then there should be a permanent number of
Population,
like
yeah.
seats, right?
Yeah.
It's like a musical chair contest.
It's like the movie theaters now, right? You have to like reserve all your seats. Like you just can't walk into movie theaters anymore.
Okay, I think we're definitely not getting to all the questions.
Let's only do people who
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to speak yet.
I think we can continue maybe one or two, and
Okay.
we can ask them to
Next
repost.
week?
Yeah, next week.
Okay. 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 So, can you share what has been especially inspiring in your recent practice?
That's a good question to finish.
Yes.
You want to start?
Recently in my practice, I've really been focusing on people. Buddhism only happens when there's people, right? The Dhamma, we need people there. So I say this because I was in Vietnam and Cambodia and I was wandering around. And then over here, and at least in the temples over here, everything kind of seems like more like manicured or were catered to. And it just kind of sometimes feels like artificial. But when I was out there, I got to meet people like in the rice fields in the cities, like in front of like these big things where they make shoes, these big factories, people going into work early in the morning. And I was like, oh, wow, like these people, they're just like living their lives and they're trying so hard to do the best for their families and trying to do the best for their countries that are developing. And they're trying to do their best to support their local temples. Almost all the temples are under construction, some project, right? Like they're trying to make it better. And they're supporting all these young monks and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, wow, these people are so amazing. Like they have all these duties. They have all these burdens. And like I saw them smiling. They're happy. When they saw me, they were always happy to see me as a monk walking. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I got a lot of energy and motivation by seeing them and like how much gratitude and appreciation they have and how generous. I was like, wow. And I even started getting like tearful when this hit me, and I was like, that's so inspiring me. So that's like the recent thing that came to practice. Like it's about this community of people working together, supporting each other. Such a beautiful thing when we all feel so divided and isolated in this society and so antagonistic, and that there's this group and that group. But no, actually in the Dhamma, we're all just come together peacefully, talk peacefully, leave peacefully, as the Buddha gave the advice of the Vajjayans and things like that. So that's recent. That's my most recent thing that's kind of inspired me in my practice recently.
Well, I think speaking of people, I mean, it's hard to think of specifically, but I was thinking that actually I think Bhante Sumita has been what's inspired me recently, because he's here now, and this is the first time I'm meeting Bhante, so I haven't met him before. Not tonight, but in general. And he's a very senior monk, and very learned and very kind. So I think recently that's really been, it's been a change here, and I've really been hoping to learn and observe him. So I think, actually, Bhante Sumita has been the person who has been inspiring to my practice recently.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mhm.
For me, I think me as a monk, whenever I travel from one place to another, I meet many people, many monastics, and many people from different communities, different cultures, different languages. I feel so touched by that. I always it's like that. So recently, I have been traveling a little bit more. I went to Sri Lanka. We built a house for a poor family. There were four children, and they were all six people sleeping on the same bed. And it was really heart melting, when you see that. And so with the help of the community, we built a house for them. I went there to, hand over the key, and I feel so touched by the amazing gratitude of those people and the smile of those people. And I feel like every time they go to bed in the night, they feel so relaxed, they're so released and so peaceful. So when you do that kind of activities, it gives you immense happiness, unprecedented happiness, I would say. And also, whenever I see go from one place to another, meeting wonderful monastics, and especially the monastics, whenever I see them, different monastics, I feel so good. And when I also see different people, I feel so good. So it's always inspiring me. So I continue to travel as a wandering monk.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay, well, it
Yeah.
looks like
Yeah.
we're just on time. Bante, do you any want to say finishing words?
Yeah, I think today we have a lot of questions. We would really like to invite you to come up with these questions again next time, so that we can answer, and really appreciate everyone who joined us today. And also, we really want to say thank you to these wonderful monastics and Empty Cloud Monastery for conducting this monk chat. It really gives so much pleasure and happiness to both of us, both monks and also the lay people. So they feel so good when we meet each other and have that chat, monk chat. It really makes a lot of sense. So today we also would like to invoke blessings upon each and every one of you. May the noble triple gem bless you, help you, protect you, and guide you towards the right path. May all of you be blessed by the noble triple gem, and all devas and all celestial beings and all Kalyan with the friends. May all of you and all your family members, your loved ones, friends and relatives, teachers and elders be blessed by the noble triple gem. May all the Mahasangha members and all of you, all sentient beings, including Devas, Brahmas, be able to live their life peacefully, comfortably, with good health. May all of us be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, the absolute peace and happiness at the end of our samsara. Thinking thus, let us keep our palms together close to our heart and say three times, Sadhu,
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 Sadhu.
sadhu.
Thank you, and see you again next week.
Bye.